I guess you love movies. I do too. Hi guys, and welcome back to another classic movie review. And today we're talking about one of my favourite directors, Stanley Kubrick, and his masterpiece, Paths of Glory. Paths of Glory stars Kirk Douglas, and he plays a colonel. He calls Colonel Dax in World War One in France, and he leads his regiment in the trenches into a suicidal mission to take the anthill. The general that gives him this order, once they retreat after failing to take it, accuses 3 men in his regiment, in several regiments, of cowardice in order to cover his own mistake. And Dax tries to defend them and make sure that they aren't killed by the firing squad. So what did I think of Paths of Glory? Now, I've heard many things about this movie. Obviously, it was probably one of Kubrick's earlier films. 1957 it came out. It's one of his sort of first mature pictures after The Killing, which was probably his first sort of a film that he considers to be a mature work. Before then, he did I can't even remember. Was it Killer's Kiss and Fear and Desire? Sort of, small projects that he really hated. But The Killing was really the start of him as a mature director, and Paths of Glory is that coming full circle. This is the first masterpiece from Stanley Kubrick. This is the most obvious, the earliest and the most obvious of Kubrick's films in this period. Now, what did I specifically like about this movie? Obviously, if you've watched any of my videos, I'm a massive Kubrick fan. 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of my favourite movies of all time. I think it's one of the greatest American films ever made. Simple as that. And Kubrick is one of America's greatest ever directors, without a doubt. Dr. Strangelove is one of the great war satires, and one of the greatest of his films. The Shining is the greatest horror movie of all time. So whichever genre he chooses to work in, he always seems to manage to master it in some way. And in this film, he does exactly the same. Now, what is so good about this movie? Well, firstly, the performances are great. Kirk Douglas is excellent in this movie. He has some really emotional scenes throughout, and I really enjoy his character and his performances in this. His performance in this film. Kirk Douglas is a top quality actor, and this just shows his range and qualities throughout this film. His subtlety, but also his emotion when it bursts out, is very, very powerful in this movie. Also, in terms of cinematography, this film is brilliantly shot, and I can only think that this is down to Kubrick himself, because I've looked at the cinematographer's sort of filmography. It's very minimal. Kubrick's known for being very hands-on with the camera work in his films. He shot most of his earlier films, and by this point I can imagine he's not quite out of the habit of that. And there's some brilliant tracking shots in this movie. The action is exceptional. When they actually go over the top to attack the anthill in this movie, there's some great fluid tracking shots. These gorgeous group shots of the chaos and violence of this attack, and how they're getting pushed back. Also, there's some brilliant tracking shots in the trenches, which are very famous. They actually had to widen the original size of a trench in order to fit the camera kit and everything in there in order to do these tracking shots, but it's definitely worth it because they look gorgeous in this film. Yeah, brilliantly shot, brilliantly composed. But the main thing that I really like about this movie is Kubrick is a great master in terms of technically. He has great clarity of vision, but what Kubrick doesn't really get as much credit for, maybe as I think he should do, is he's one of cinema's greatest satirists. He satirises the most kind of important things, the most sort of powerful, the most sort of dark things. Dr. Strangelove, he satirises the Cold War. In this movie, he satirises World War One, but in a way, this is his darkest satire. In what Kubrick says specifically throughout his greatest films, 2001 and Dr. Strangelove, is that even with our vast intelligence compared to other beings, other animals on our planet, that our intelligence is our greatest strength. It is also our greatest failing, is our ignorance, and that even with our vast intelligence, we still end up with people unstable and people who are bordering on the insane actually making the most important decisions in our world. specifically in Doctor Strangelove with Sterling Hayden, who obviously decides to attack Russia for insane reasons, and the general in this film decides to attack the anthill for his own gain. He has no care for these men that are actually putting their lives on the line to get him higher up in the hierarchy of the French army. All he cares about is himself. There's a brilliant scene with Kirk Douglas where he's talking about he doesn't want to do this mission. He's, standing up to him, and he tells him about the percentages of how many people will die, and he talks about it so cold and mechanically, like they're just numbers, that they're not people, that, yeah, a certain percentage will die, but a certain percentage will be left, which will be just enough to take the anthill. And he just talks about it in such a cold, calculated manner. He has no care for these people at all. He's completely emotionless. And this sort of lack of humanity in these situations is one of the best things about this film, and how it satirises this. The absurdity of the trial after this. These three men that have been picked out, no good reason. There's no reason why they should be picked out over any of the other soldiers in the film. There is one soldier, however, that we see a situation earlier in the movie as to why maybe he was picked. Again, personal preference and trying to save themselves embarrassment and dishonourment, because being dishonoured, because they don't care about the people. They just care about their own, how they look, and that's what they care about, and that's very powerful in this movie and very obvious. And it would be an absurdist comedy if it wasn't so tragic. This is a fantastic. This is the blackest and darkest satire you're going to see. This isn't funny. You almost laugh because it's so awful. And you just can't believe that these people exist. But they do. And simply, there's a scene also earlier in the film with Kirk Douglas who they talk about patriotism, and he says that patriotism is the last, resort of a scoundrel. And what he means by that is that these people will use anything to justify their actions. They will use patriotism, their love of their country, to do horrible things. And this continues to happen throughout history. Religion specifically, faith in religion and love of country have caused more, horror than anything in human history, and that's what Kubrick is talking about in this film. These horrible people will use these excuses to, justify their inhuman actions, and that's what he brilliantly shows in this movie through these generals who are completely disconnected from the front line. They're living in these chateaux and drinking cognac, and they have no idea what's really going on. All they care about is their own self-interests. They don't understand the horror that is miles from their luxury house. They give orders and people die for them. They don't care about them at all. And by the end of the film, obviously it's very powerful, but there's a scene with a German singer that's dragged out in front of the men, and she sings, and all of the ruckus and all of the sort of pent-up aggression dissipates, and innocence and raw beauty come through in that scene in some serious emotion, and it's one of the best scenes in the film, and it's sort of like all of the horror of the war has been stripped away in one singular moment, and it's very beautiful. The woman actually that's the actress in the film is actually Kubrick met her on the filming of Paths of Glory, and he married her very shortly afterwards. He's married to her until he died. But that scene is fantastic, and I enjoy that specifically. But Paths of Glory is a brilliant humanist social commentary on war and on power, and on self obsession. It's got brilliant action, fantastic performance by Kirk Douglas, and probably the first of Kubrick's masterpieces. Paths of Glory is a fabulous movie, and I'm definitely going to give it 10 out of 10. So there you go, there's my review of Paths of Glory. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, like, subscribe, drop your comments down in the section below. What is your favourite Stanley Kubrick movie? As I said, mine's 2001. Paths of Glory is right up there now, I'd say. Probably right up there with Doctor Strangelove as the second probably best Kubrick movie I've seen. I do still love The Shining, but this movie probably just takes the cake for me over that. Is there any other classic movie reviews you think I should do? If so, drop them down in the comment section below, and hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Goodbye.